Who doesn't want abs? One of the most common questions individuals in the fitness space get is, how do I get abs? In particular, people will often ask about, how do I train my upper abs? How do I train my lower abs? A lot of people struggle with understanding the differences, which exercises to use when, and how to most effectively target these areas. Today, we're going to go through the research on how you can best maximize targeting your lower and upper abs. Welcome. I'm Dr. Sam Spinelli, physical therapist, transitioning coach with Citizen Athletics. Now, before we get into the content today, if you could smash that like button down below, it helps us out a ton. And if you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe. We try to release at least 2 videos every week covering fitness, nutrition, and a ton more. There's going to be 2 main caveats as we get into this discussion. The first one is on body fat. A lot of individuals are going to want to try to target their abs, trying to build up the musculature and work that region, which is fantastic. But if you're someone who's a bit higher in weight and it has a lot more belly fat, then as much as you try to work your abs, they're not going to show unless you shed off some of that fat. Generally, we don't see the abs show very well unless someone is as a minimum between that 15 and 20% body fat for men and a little bit higher for women. So if you are someone who is at that body fat percentage or above, you're going to want to consider implementing some diet strategies and also doing some lifestyle changes to get that body fat percentage down before thinking that these exercises are going to be the game changers for you. This doesn't mean that exercise isn't relevant, but the idea of spot reduction, doing thousands of crunches or sit-ups to that region and making your abs show isn't real. So focus on nutritional strategies, lifestyle changes, and a good exercise program. And if you need more help with that, check out the videos that we got down below. We'll try to link a few resources to help you out there. Now, the second caveat is that you don't have to train your abs in isolation. Van den Tiller et al. Compared core muscle activation between a plank with 20% body weight on the back and a heavy 6-rep max back squat and saw similar rectus abdominis activation. The plank was superior for training the abs, but not by as much as many would think. As well, Setter-Becken et al. Compared core muscle activation during various compound resistance movements and saw that when an exercise was done unilaterally, it had significantly more rectus abdominis activation. So for people that are doing heavy compound movements and sprinkling in some unilateral movements along the way, you likely don't have to train your abs, at least in isolation. They're going to get a lot of stimulus through these bigger compound movements, and it's going to be more than sufficient for most people if you're leaner to have your abs show up. If you are trying to maximize your abdominal development though, these exercises that we're going to go through are going to be ones that are going to help you do that based on science. Now, we can generally divide the rectus abdominis, that muscle on the front of our abdomen, into 2 main parts, the upper and lower regions. The upper is going to be the top 2 muscle bellies there, and then the lower is going to be the bottom 2 muscle bellies. The upper abs is going to be primarily working on flexing your thoracic and lumbar spine, so bringing your rib cage down towards your pelvis. In contrast, your lower abs is going to do the reverse, where it's going to be posteriorly tilting your pelvis and bringing your pelvis towards your thoracic spine. And then collectively, they bring the pelvis and rib cage closer together. Now, a question some people ask is, can we really work the upper versus the lower abs? And the short answer is yes and no. You see, the first thing is that our rectus abdominis, that muscle in the front, is divided into multiple little muscle bellies separated by fascia. As well, it has multiple nerves innervating it. This is different than other muscles, like your biceps, which is only innervated by one nerve. Because of this, it does allow us to actually work the upper and lower abs slightly differently. The yes part in the equation is that we really can't work the upper or lower abs in isolation. Whenever you work one, you will have the other one work to a degree. But we can preference the activation in them. This is something we can see with belly dancers, who they can actually perform that belly roll where they work the upper, mid, and lower abs separately. And we can actually see this on EMG studies that have been done on belly dancers. As well, when they do different research studies looking at exercises on the abs, we do see a difference between activation levels in the upper and lower abs depending on the type of movement that's being executed. Now, we're getting into the best exercises for both the upper and lower abs. In deciding these best exercises, we had a few main things that we wanted to consider in picking them. Number 1, we picked isotonic-based movements. This is where we have motion occur during the exercise. We picked isotonic-based movements over isometrics, like planks, because we can generally see more hypertrophy or muscle development with isotonic movements over isometrics. Secondly, the exercises that we picked as being our top choices are ones that maximize our leverages to challenge the muscle to the highest degree. And thirdly, the movements that we picked are relatively stable options that put less of a demand on control and balance, instead let you focus on working the muscle to the highest degree. Alright, so now let's get into some upper abdominal based exercises. In looking at our top choices, we're going to want to look at movements that are going to be working on upper trunk flexion. Ideally, we pick exercises that are going to allow us to get into some spinal extension. That way we can work through more range. As well, we want to try to have some sort of an option to where we're going to be on a good angle. That way as we come up, we're going to have a mechanical challenge. You see when I'm sitting and I bend forward, there's not really much challenge for my abs to work through. Whereas as I progressively get more and more reclined backwards, or eventually inverted, there's a higher degree of challenge for me to bend forward. So we want to consider that in picking our choice. So our top movement is going to combine these. This is where we're going to go with a decline crunch or sit up with some extra weight for resistance. In doing this, if you have a decline bench available to you, they're a great resource. If you don't, you can elevate one side of a standard weight bench, secure it down safely, and then use that. Here we want to have our legs hooked in on one side, hold a weight towards our chest on the other end, and then curl up. You can either do a minimal motion crunch, or you can go through a significant more range and do a full sit-up. The crunch is probably going to preference more of those upper abs, whereas the sit-up is going to be a bit more of a total abdominal movement. Again, the more decline you get, the more general challenge will likely be. There's going to be a sweet spot where if you go too far, you're going to have a hard time controlling the movement, and if you go too little, you won't get a sufficient challenge. So try to find that smooth point. Now, if you can't set that up, here's a few different options you can use. An easy one is a ball crunch. This is going to allow you to, again, come back into extension, roll over the ball, and then come and curl back up. You can either hold a weight plate or a dumbbell at your chest, or hold it straight out with your arms in front of you, and then as you go up, bring it up overhead. You can also do this off of a bench, where you secure your legs tight against the sides of the pad, and let your shoulders round over the pad, and then curl back up. And if you can't set up any of those, then you can also do a cable or band crunch, where you have the device set up high above you, extend up tall, and then curl down, really trying to bring your forehead towards the ground. Those are going to be the top upper abdominal based exercises based off the current science we have on the subject. Now as we transition to the lower abs, we're going to be looking to change things up and instead focus on bringing the knees towards the chest and getting a nice solid posterior pelvic tilt. Anytime we do a lower abdominal exercise, we're going to really want to focus on that detail, the posterior pelvic tilt. You can think of this as trying to bring your belt buckle towards your chin. This is a game changer if you've neglected this in the past while training your lower abs. This really maximizes the length-tension relationship for your lower abs. Now, taking into consideration all of the information we've discussed on how we can maximize the challenge to the lower abs and picking the best option available, a great one that we're going to suggest is going to be a hanging leg / knee raise with your back supported. This setup is a bit of a commitment, so if you don't want to do this, you can skip ahead in a moment and see what are other options. But for this, we're going to set up a bar on a rack at approximately your mid-back position when you're hanging from a bar. You're going to want some sort of pad on the bar, that way it doesn't bother your back and allows you to really curve around the bar. So we're going to suggest something like a foam roller that's going to be able to wrap around the bar and give you nice comfort and also give you a position to roll against. Then you're going to want to have a bench or box set up, that way you're able to stand, get into hanging position safely, not having to jump and wrap around it, as that would be dangerous. And this also gives you something that you can stop your legs against each time, that way you reduce momentum and really focus on a muscular challenge. This is going to be a great option to work through a big range and also give you a peak challenge through the motion. This is what makes this better than the standard leg raise or knee raise. When we do the normal hanging knee raise or leg raise, our body shifts back as we bring our legs and knees up. To understand the problem with this, you can think about a bicep curl. When you perform a bicep curl and your hand comes up towards your shoulder, you want your elbow to stay forward to really maximize feeling it in your bicep. If your elbow shifts back and your hand comes straight up, this reduces the moment arm and decreases how hard your bicep works. So that's why we have that back support in this movement to really maximize how much we're working the abs. Now, this is an elaborate setup. You might not be able to do this. We understand that's an issue. And that's where these alternatives come in. The first alternative is to go to that decline bench setup we had, but now we're going to flip around and use it as an incline bench setup and lay with our back on it. and then we're going to do the knee tuck from here. This is going to give you a lot of stability, really maximize the leverages again, and let you work on really challenging your lower abs. As you do this, you don't want your legs to go too far out during the movement, as it's going to work a lot more of your hip flexors and not necessarily your abs. If you don't have a decline set up, then you can go to the standard reverse crunch that's either on a flat bench or on the ground and execute it in the same way. Now those are going to be the best exercises for challenging your lower abs based off of the current science that we have on the subject. In a future video, we're going to cover more exercises that work both the upper and lower at the same time, more exercises that are globally challenging the whole core as a collective unit, and a ton more. So make sure you subscribe to see those videos as they come out. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. It helps us out a ton. And we'll see you in the next video.